Hello, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this next edition of Coffee, Tea, You and Me. Every time I do a broadcast, I always want to tell you all exactly how long we've been doing this broadcast. And we haven't actually been doing this as a broadcast. We've been doing it as a broadcast as long as, at least as long as we've been in COVID-19. So that's at least March of 2020, right? But we've actually been doing this program, Coffee, Tea, You and Me, for close to 18 years now. And so if you multiply the 18 years we've been doing this program, right, times about 52 weeks a year, because we really don't miss it. Even if I'm on vacation, I'll figure out a way to do it or make it happen. Even if I have to have a guest coach or a guest presenter, that's a lot of programming and a lot of content. Some of which is available if you've been paying attention. Some of the content that we've been put together is available on YouTube, and some of it is available on my Facebook stream. And so I would appreciate it if you were participating in that, if you would go on, log on, subscribe if you were watching this on YouTube, or like it if you're watching this on Facebook. But more importantly, I would love it if you would consider it worthy to share what you've experienced when it comes to this program or any other content that we put together. Leave me a recommendation on LinkedIn, or share the video with some friends and colleagues. As you know, for those of you who have been following, this is the second edition of our track that we're running on about principle-centered planning. When you think about planning, and you think about what is essential that you should bring to the table whenever you're doing any kind of planning for anything, and we're planning for 2021, it is essential that when you're looking at your 2021 plans, when my partners and I, when we're putting together processes and programs for the roundtable, when we're discussing what individually we might want to do with our businesses, when we're beginning to think through, goals and visions and things we want to accomplish for the next year or 3 years or 5 years, it is essential to review what are your principles and what are your values, and understanding the differences between those two, because they both guide and direct your behavior. Studies have shown for thousands of years, when you ask people why they do things, and you could continue to ask that question, well, why do you do that? 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 And when they get down to the rock bottom of that answer, there's usually a principle or a value that's governing the behavior, that's really, really at play. Sometimes you're conscious of it, and sometimes you're totally unconscious of it. And I'm going to suggest, from a planning point of view, you need to be conscious and aware of the principles and values that drive the behavior that, as a leader, you might be sharing with your team, with your organization. Not only should you be conscious of those things, you should be articulate of those things, because one of the ways we establish trust is through sharing, communicating effectively the things that we care about, the things that are important to us, the things and ideas and concepts that matter, that create meaning in our lives, and our abilities to share that with one another and articulate them well, but also to act on them and help others act on them, is really one of the biggest benefits of life, and one of the biggest benefits of communication, which we're going to talk about today. And over the next couple of weeks, we're going to be breaking down various forms of communication and what they mean in terms of the principles that we use as at the round table, so that you get an example of how principles should live in your life and your organization. Now, we covered last week that most of us have learned principles in different ways. Some of us have learned principles through participation in organizations we may have grown up participating in, maybe church or the Scouts, right? I know I participated in the Scouts when I was younger, and then there's a whole set of principles there. I participated in church when I was younger. There's a whole set of principles there. Then some of those principles got locked in my participation to my fraternity when I was in college. And then as I grew into a more mature professional, and the principles of the workplace kind of became a part of my life, and how all those things now currently live and I activate and use is subject to how I consciously want to live and walk in my world. And so the ability for people to understand me means they have to understand my principles. Now, I should say principles and values to be clear, because we're all talking about communication today. So we have to be very clear with how we articulate our thoughts and what we mean by them when we do share them. But when people don't understand your principles and values, and they look at your behavior, and your behavior doesn't seem to coincide with what they believe your principles and values should be, then they think of you as a hypocrite. They think of you as somebody who doesn't walk it like they talk it. They think about somebody who has a disconnect there, and it's very hard to trust. It's very difficult to trust what you don't understand, and we're going to talk about that all day today, until we get tired and we've communicated as much as we want. And I'm going to give you sort of a snapshot of what I hope to share with you in terms of the research that I've been able to do over these last few weeks, because I decided to take a deep dive into communication and communication and collaboration and encouragement, which happens to be the three principles of the round table. And the reason why I'm doing this is because I want to solidify for our members what we mean by those things and what they look like, but also to teach the rest of the world, that when you use principles as the foundational idea or concept that you run organizations on, or you create teams with, or that you use it, you are doing a great thing by being able to articulate not just what they are, but what they mean to you and how they're going to be expressed. And so today's principle, we're going to really take a deep dive in. There's a roundtable principle, is communication. And I'm hoping to clear up a lot of questions and hopefully ask and answer a lot of questions based on what you guys bring to the table. And so let me first of all kind of give you some ideas about where we pull this information from. And when I do any training, I always try to be as thorough as I possibly can in my fact finding and in my information gathering, right? I looked at what the major benefits of communications in organizations, specifically networking partnerships, and we're going to discuss what those major benefits are. We looked at what is most important and what is powerful to most people when it comes to communication. And by the way, if you're looking at this and you found this through LinkedIn, you probably also found a poll that I put out there that begins to help you engage with some information about the most meaningful conversations out there. And if you know my LinkedIn channel, you can go on and check that poll. If not, you can join me on LinkedIn. You can still check out that poll, right? So it's a wonderful poll that I'm hoping people will take advantage of and use, because I think that the information that we gather there is going to be also useful for future publications and what people seem to be interested in when it comes to discovering what communication and the powerful benefits communication can do for them. The next thing we just really looked at what the great writers were thinking about when they talk about communication. We looked at stuff from Aristotle on up to modern day philosophers and writers and teachers, and what they've said about communication, the power of communication, and what it means. So we're going to talk a little bit about some of that stuff. We also, like always, I always look at the wisdom text, right? I always look at the Bible, I look at the Quran, I look at the Torah, and I figure out, what has been written from this ancient wisdom about whatever we're talking about. So today's topic is about communication. So I'm going to share some ideas that come from those particular pieces. We also look at communication, anything we're going to do with individuals from a neuroscientific point of view. What happens in the brain when we get it right, when we get it wrong? We got to look at something through the lens of the powerful truth, and we also have to look at through the lens of what happens when we get it wrong perspective, and that would deepen our understanding so that we can really, really come to some concept or some idea that matters quite a bit. And this is very, very important, because I think that when you're talking about a word that's or a thought process or thing that's valuable as communication, you really, really, really got to give it a thorough deep dive in the research. Now, the training that I put together from all of this research really could take 2-3 days to go through. We're not going to do that. We're going to deep dive into this stuff, but we're going to go really fast. And so I know there are going to be some questions and some things that we're not going to be able to cover and we're not going to be able to take advantage of. But that doesn't mean you have to miss out. So if there's something that happens or something that you understand or you want to share, go ahead and share it in the chat. If it's something that you are concerned with when it comes to communication, ask the question in the chat, create the discussion. You never know if it's not me or somebody else that might get involved and might be able to shed some light on that. Whether you're watching this through Facebook or you're watching it through YouTube, it's important that you express your thoughts and you create discourse, because discourse, in my learning as I have grown as a professional, is really, really important for everybody to establish a basis of understanding, and it helps you. The more you can communicate, the more you can establish that. Okay, so let's get into communication. Before we do that, I want to do one last thing. If you haven't already, introduce yourselves in the chat, whether on YouTube or on Facebook. Go ahead and do so. I see my buddy Scott's already in the studio. I love it when Scott supports me. I really appreciate it, buddy. And there are some other people who are out there, which is great. I want to see you. So if you have some ideas or some thoughts about communication and what they mean to you, I would love it if you would take a moment to share those ideas in the chat, either again on Facebook or YouTube. Go ahead and throw your ideas out there, because I've got lots of questions that I'm going to be dealing with. And hopefully there's some things that you can share as those questions come out. We're going to even teach you a little bit of an assessment at the end of our workshop about communication, so that you can begin to determine for yourself, do you have the right stuff? Are you doing this correctly? So hang in there with me. I see you, Jasmine. So good to see you, sweetie. Thank you for coming out. Thank you for participating. It really matters a lot that you're here. That's nice. Again, for all of our studio audience, if you have any questions about communications, any thoughts about communication, on what they mean specifically to you when it comes to your networking, that would be brilliant. As a matter of fact, I'm going to go through with you the poll that I put together on LinkedIn, and maybe I can even share that poll. Let me see if I can do that. I'm going to see if I can share it. I think I can. Do me a favor and go to the chat and see if you can open that poll that I just shared, either on Facebook or LinkedIn, and give me a thumbs up or thumbs down or some kind of indication that you can open it. Because if you can open it, that poll there, ask a great question. And I think that the question is, what is the most important benefit of powerful communication to you, especially within your networks? When you think about communication, what do you want it to do for you? Most importantly, do you want it to help you create relationships? Do you want it to help you establish confidence? Do you want to help you increase your engagement? Do you want it to help you improve your productivity with one another? Because when you think about these things, these are some of the major benefits, not all the benefits, but some of the major benefits of communication, right? And doing it well matters. Because if you can imagine, if you don't do it well, people say when you communicate effectively in teams and organizations, the relationships grow. They're made stronger, right? The opposite's also true. If you communicate ineffectively and you don't do it right, then you damage those relationships and you create angst and anxiety and mistrust, right? If you do it right, you establish confidence, things that people can believe in and trust, and they can just roll with it, right? You can have deeper connection with individuals because there's a safety involved in good communication. When you know someone is not going to mislead you, when you know someone is going to speak the truth, when you know that someone has your best interest in heart because they've shared that with you, right, in a meaningful, powerful, positive way, that it's going to increase your confidence in them. It's going to make you believe in them. When they listen to you, it's going to make them believe. So all this is part of communication, right? When you get people, when people are actually paying attention, and I want to go into that a little bit later too, when people are actually engage with you. They're actually involved, connected, interested, really, really participating in whatever communication that you're using, right? How's that feel? Does that feel bad to you? Because sometimes you don't want the spotlight, but sometimes you need the spotlight in order to effectively know that you're meaning something. You've mattered somehow, some way, and what you mean is coming through in a brilliant way. And so, that's a question out there. What's more important to you? Is it? And then also, there's productivity when you think about communication. Communication is the engine that allows us to do everything we do, because it's a transfer of knowledge. It's a transfer of information that we need in order to have access to the parts of our brain and our body, mind, kinesthetic, to create action. We need information. We don't just create action with no information. We need information to create action. And I think that's very, very important, because this is the reason why productivity is so important. So if you can take a look at that link and take that poll, I would really appreciate it. It would be most important. And I understand that a lot of you all maybe not be able to do it because you're watching this either from your phone or you're not really plugged into a computer or something like that. But if you can, take a look at that link that I posted, and I'm going to repost it one more time. I see you out there, Suresh. All righty. Good to see you, my friend. If you go there and to the link that I shared with you on Facebook or on YouTube and take the poll, I would really appreciate it, because it would give me more information and more information to others, about what's most valuable and meaningful to you when it comes to communication. What do you want to see happen as a result of your communication strategy? Okay, so let's get into it. Let's get into today's topic. Let's just break this down. What do we talk about? When we're talking about communication, what are we really saying? What does it mean? Where does it come from? The whole 9 yards. Let's break this down. So communication is derived from the Latin term communicare, which means to share, right? It is the vehicle, the function by which we share everything. When you think about it, there is nothing that we do in human existence when it comes to sharing that doesn't involve some form of communication. Now, there's visual communication, there's verbal communication, there is nonverbal communication, there are signals that create communication, right? There's all kinds of ways to transfer information from one person to another person effectively, right? This is what communication is. It is the process by which we transfer information from one person to another person effectively. That's communication. Now, there is good communication, which means the information is transferred well, and there's bad communication, which means the information that's transferred did not happen so well. I know that all of us at some point have been victims of bad communication. What happens when we don't get proper communication? Go ahead and throw some notions that you may have in the chat for me, for in either on YouTube or Facebook. What do you think happens when bad communication? We experience bad communication. What happens to us? What happens to the relationships, right? When we experience bad communication. Go ahead and put your ideas, your thoughts about that in the chat. And I'll tell you that it's very difficult to experience the benefits of good communication when it's not done well. Okay. And I'm going to go through those benefits with you in a little bit, but I'm interested in your ideas. What do you think happens? Thank you, Jasmine. I see you out there. Thank you. I'm interested in your ideas about what happens when it's done incorrectly, right? And I'm going to share with you some other thoughts, right? So we understand that communication is the appropriate transfer of information from one person to the other person using whatever strategy that you want to use. That's communication. But your network, is it important to communicate effectively with those in your network? I mean, why should people that are connected to you somehow really be a part of that information transfer? Well, what we found out in our studies that there's a law that's working constantly in life. And it's a principle of basic life, right? It's the law of reciprocity. People, when they get a chance to experience one another, they have the opportunity to transfer to each other what they know. And sometimes they take advantage of that opportunity, and sometimes they don't. When they take advantage of that opportunity, when the teacher shows up, right, in any situation, if the students are prepared and they're ready to learn, listen, engage, then the teacher can transfer to the student something that might be meaningful or useful to them. Right? So communication happens within the roles that we play often. One of the roles might be I'm as a part of your network. I've decided to partner with you. I've decided to work with you. I've decided to experience the same space, the same time with you. Whatever we're doing, we've decided we're going to work together. Can we work together without good communication? Is our work going to come out useful, relevant, meaningful if communication is bad between us? So back to that law of reciprocity. If I want you to communicate effectively what you know that might be meaningful and useful and interesting to me, I've got to be willing to do the same to you and others. So what stops meaningful communication from happening to people, for people, with people? What process or problems get in the way of people having direct and effective communication with each other? Could it be, I don't know, ego? Or could it be mismanaged expectations? Or maybe assumptions? Or maybe it's people don't want to share, so they choose not to? Maybe they're jealous, maybe they're fearful, maybe they've been misunderstood so much they feel like it's impossible for them to communicate effectively. You have all those things going on in all of our networks. All of those pathologies, I'm going to say communication pathologies, I just made that word up, or that phrase up, right? That are happening all the time. And we have to do things to prevent those negative processes from occurring inside of our communication process. We have to choose the right roles, and we have to think about them correctly, and we have to process the information in a way that's going to be powerful. So I'm going to go through with you all the 6 benefits of communication. And I'm going to key on 1 or 2 of them, but I can't do all of them in terms of really exploring them like I really want to, because we just don't have the time. But I'm going to share with you what they are, because I want you to really think about them. There's 6 benefits to communication. Number 1, there is increasing and building confidence, which is a way of saying building trust, right? There is preventing and resolving problems. There is providing clarity and direction. That's number 3. Number 4, communication. Good communication helps create better relationships. It also helps create and maintain better relationships. Number 5, good communication strategy increases engagement, which is our ability to connect, our ability to share, our ability to be passionate about one another, our ability to literally grow together, right? And number 6, communication improves productivity. It is everything that strengthens, everything that creates more resilience, more resolve, everything that literally makes profit happen without scarcity. We'll go back to that in a little bit, right? So think about it. If communication is the tool that we need to build trust, to prevent problems, to provide clarity, to increase engagement, to create relationship, to improve productivity, shouldn't we spend more time and effort to clear up anything that can make it go wrong? Because who doesn't want to experience these benefits? Who doesn't want to have more faith in each other? Who doesn't want to trust people more? You know, who doesn't want to prevent problems from happening and resolve them quickly when they do happen? Who doesn't want to have clarity and understanding in the directions that they receive and give to one another? Who wouldn't want to increase that level of effectiveness and engagement with each other, or create more deeper, more passionate, more meaningful relationships with those who can and should support our efforts in our lives? Who wouldn't want to improve productivity, which is growth, which is strength, which is power? Who wouldn't want that, right? All of this requires excellence in communication. It requires making sure that the communication is done properly. And we tend to, in our society specifically, poo-poo communication and the skill set required to make communication happen well. We tend to look down on it as, you know, that's that easy major that people don't talk about in college. You know, they go, oh, well, you majored in communication. Okay. Outside of PR or journalism, you know, or writing, what else are you going to do with this thing? You're not going to do anything that's going to do anything. But actually, we all have to, we all should take a master course on communication, in my point of view, because doing so helps us honor, and it helps us to, correctly position what the most meaningful resource we have in the universe is. And that's our ability to transfer, our ability to share information, opportunities, ideas from one person to another person. Now, the cheat is look it up on the internet. The cheat is to read it in a book. The cheat is listen to an audio file of some type of data that somebody produced 20, 30 years ago as if it's relevant right now. But the information that's most relevant, most meaningful in the situation that we're in right now today is verbal, face-to-face, right? That is the most meaningful, impactful information in any moment that two people can share with each other. Because, and I'm going to find some quotes on this later on and share those with you. But when you think about it, it's the moment that matters. It's not the future, it's not the past. It's the moment that matters. Yes, you can write about and pontificate on what happened in the past, and we can share that history, that knowledge, that information from history, and it's all great and it's all good, and it feels wonderful to be knowledgeable about what happened. But if what is happening right now could end your life, all that happened back then, all that can do is prepare you to do something now. Now, if you follow any of the things we talked about earlier, we talked about developing habits. History created the habits that you have right now. Your history created the habits that you have right now. And those are good habits or bad habits. If somebody helped you communicate back then, everything you needed to communicate to establish the habits, the assumptions, the preconceived notions, the biases that you currently have going on in your head and in your life. But none of that has to do with what's going on right now. It's all the past. It might be true now, but then again, maybe not. You have to be open to the here and now, which is made difficult by what's happened in your past, by the communication strategies, the techniques that people have used in your past. So people ask me all the time, We talk about this, and especially now that Kwanzaa is coming up, and the thought that there are some ideas and some principles that are universal, specifically within the African American community, that they should embrace, but they have, no recent history or information or knowledge about that, so it's very difficult for them to embrace it. If you don't understand that and help people live in the now, then they will lose the benefit of the now, worrying about what happened in the past or what's going to happen in the future, what might happen in the future, predictably based on the past information, which I already told you is probably misinformation for the now. So it probably might be misinformation for the future. I don't know what your responses to those thoughts are, but I love to hear them. I love to hear your thoughts in the chat, whether you're watching this on Facebook or you're watching it on YouTube. And again, if you haven't already introduced yourself and shared with us who you are and what you're all about and what you're doing in life and what you're doing in business, please do so in the chat, because you never know who you might strike a relationship with. People might get in touch with you. You might be able to help somebody with something else. And that's part of what we're going to talk about today, is your ability to effectively communicate. Two things: your character and your competence. In every area of life, no matter where you are in life, no matter what you do, we all have a level of character and competence that's at play. Now, the reason why I mention those things is because in the world of networking, what we're trying to do with one another is create the world in which we trust one another, and then we can leverage and use trust to carry us forward in our relationships, to carry us forward in our business, to carry us forward in our lives. But when we don't trust each other, specifically because of the quality and nature of our character or the lack of our ability and competence, then it's difficult then to support each other. It's difficult to trust. It's difficult to leverage. And what do I mean by that? Let me give you a concrete example. People show up in my networking meeting all the time, and they instantly try to within 30 seconds to 2 minutes, right, to convince me and everybody in the room that they're a person that can be trusted, specifically around what it is that they're selling or trying to share with one another. It's a very difficult trick in a communicative process to walk into a brand new tribe that hasn't seen you ever and communicate to a group of strangers that you're a person that can and should be trusted, specifically when you don't know the language, you don't know the culture, you've not been involved with these people. In order to effectively do it, you have to make a whole host of assumptions, and your assumptions have to be correct. Because if you offend one or two persons in the group, or even the whole group, you're creating a brand, you're creating an image of yourself, you're creating a reality that may or may not be true, just because you don't know how to effectively communicate within this group. This is why communication is so important. It's so easy to get it wrong. It's so easy to do it based on selfish motives that don't really add to the whole in any meaningful way. And so it's important when we talk about networking, we talk about relationships, we're talking about communication, we got to get to trust. And we got to get to trust fast. We can't waste the time. So what happens? Back to the tribal analysis. When somebody shows up in your tribe, they know the language, They understand the culture. They're dressed appropriately. There's nothing that signify that they could be dangerous. In fact, there's everything to signify to you they could be a trusted and added member of this community. Then you feel differently about those persons than the ones who show up and through no conscious desire of their own, unintentionally offend everyone around them. Because they think their job is to sell something that maybe somebody wants, maybe somebody doesn't want. But even if they did want it, they probably would be offended that they tried to sell it to them in this way. So think about that. Every time you show up to a networking organization or you've been to a networking organization and you heard the pitches from everyone, right? What are they pitching? Are they pitching their competence? Are they pitching their character? Are they trying to pitch both in 60 seconds? Are they sharing something of meaning to you? Because that's just flip side of the communication, right? The first side of the communication is somebody has something that they want to share. They want to show up to a group and share it. That's thing one. Thing two, though, is trying to understand what the group expects you to show up with and share, and making sure that you've at least got something to offer that's meaningful in the group. Because I want you to think about how the mind works and how your mind works. And I want to share some ideas with you later on, but I want you to think about that. When somebody is trying to share some information to you that you can't find any way to make it meaningful, relevant, or significant to you, how do you feel about that information? How do you feel when someone takes up your time to try to transfer to you something of meaning and value and significance to them, but has no meaning or value significance to you? How do you feel about that person? Do you feel like that's a person that can be trusted? Do you like that person? Do you want to get to know that person? Because that is the linear process of trust building, right? It's know me, like me, trust me. You have to know someone. We call this the golden triumvirate, right? The golden triangle, right? In order to build trust with someone, you have to know them, you have to like them, and then you finally have to trust them, right? And then you have that trusted environment where people know, like, and trust each other. Then 9 times out of 10, they found a way to communicate to each other what's valuable about each other, relationships they have with each other. And so you need to figure out, before you come into that environment, you need to do the hard work about what it is that you have to offer to these people, so that when you share it, they're going to see you as a person of meaning, of significance, of substance, of value. And that's the hard work that communication has to do. It has to transfer those ideas from one person to another person in order for there to be those benefits we talked about, right? And if you don't do that well, then you fail. So, okay, so what do you have to do well? 2 things you have to do well to communicate effectively. One is speak. You have to be able to tell your story. You have to be able to share information. You have to be able to willingly, consciously give people what they need to feel themselves like that was important, that was meaningful, that was significant, that was relevant. That's good. You also have to be able to simultaneously sometimes listen and hear from what somebody else is saying, so that you understand what it is that they're sharing with you that could be meaningful, significant, and relevant to you. So now I'll tell you this. This is why we have the talking stick example that we borrowed from the Indian culture, or Native American culture, I should say, to be politically correct. And certain tribes within the Native experience would pass, the tribal council would pass the talking stick around to each other. And when one of them had the talking stick, everyone else, their only responsibility was to listen to the person who had the talking stick. Not listen in a way that we've all been trained to listen, but listen in a way that we should have been trained to listen. Like we should have been trained to listen with our whole self. Call that active listen. We should be trained to suspend every other thought that we have in order to actively embrace the thoughts of someone else. That's real listening, right? That's listening and trying to absorb whatever information they're trying to share with us. And I'm going to teach you a model to know how effective you are at listening. And this is something that you can practice within yourself as you're working with other people. And hopefully I can scroll down and I can get to it fairly quickly because I love this model. I think if you use it correctly, you're going to find yourself a much better listener. Yes, it's important to repeat back to the person in some way or parrot in some way what they shared with you when they're communicating with you. But it's also important to ask yourself a couple of questions. One of the questions you should ask yourself is, are you truly engaged? Is this truly engaging? Is this information, does it resonate with you? Does this information mean something to you? Do you understand this information, meaning can you comprehend it? And last but not least, what can you do? Can you do something with this information? And I think that if you're listening to answer those ideas and those questions, right? What are they trying to say, really? What do you understand it? Do you hear it? Are you cognizant of it? Does it run around in your brain and connect with some information you may have had in the past that caused you to have that aha moment, right? You're cognitive of it. It doesn't mean anything to you. Just because you're cognizant of it doesn't mean it means something to you. Is it something that you would consider relevant or significant? Is it something that they're sharing something to you that's something that's valuable to you? Right? Can you do something with it? Can you transfer it? Can you share it? Can you engage in it? Can you do something that increases or grows either you or the person that's communicating it to you? Or both? Right? There's that reciprocity we talked about earlier. If you can do that, then you truly understand. You understand what the person has said. But I think if you haven't really thought through and asked yourselves those questions, you may run the risk of saying to that person, I get it, I understand, but you don't really. And the cost of not having a true understanding of what someone is trying to say when they're talking to you, the cost could be tremendous. Not only will you diminish your level of the benefits that we talked about, you will destroy trust. You will damage relationships. You will decrease instead of increase engagement. You will make sure that productivity has no possibility of happening. This is why when you have toxic relationships, toxic communication strategy, things that just, when you're using a strategy that does not work for whatever reason with other people, you can't transfer understanding. And if you can't transfer understanding, you can't receive significance and meaning and importance, which is what life is all about, from my point of view. But don't trust me. Let's trust some of the great minds that are out there. Nietzsche said this, and I love this thought process. Nietzsche said, I'm not upset that you lied to me. I'm upset that from now on, I can't believe you. You see, clear, honest communication always speeds up any attainment for its various benefits. But trust is so fragile. The specific connections that you need to have with people in order to make sure you do it right are palpable, meaning they have value in our world. I love this thought process that Maya Angelou shares. Maya shares that in this statement: I don't trust people who don't love themselves and tell me, I love you. There's an African saying that says, be careful when a naked person offers you a shirt. I don't trust people because I don't trust people who don't love themselves and tell me I love you. There's an African saying which is, be careful when a naked person offers you his shirt. Maya, in just those few words, help us understand there's certain questions in communication that you should be asking yourself before you communicate. You should be asking of others as they're communicating to you. You should be engaged so well that you're coming up with this information. And here are some of the questions. You might ask yourself, how are you communicating your dignity and your self-worth? Are you leaving it up to others to make assumptions about who you are and why you offer what you're offering? Or do you help them determine the ideas that they need to determine about your brand? How do you demonstrate a level of excellence and mastery for what you do without bragging or boasting? That's a complicated one. Can you differentiate yourself well with just your story alone? If you can answer these questions, and you're running into some pretty good communication strategy, but there's others. Another question you may ask is, how do you demonstrate integrity and intention to and for yourself? How do you model honesty, truth? How do you honor uprightness and reliability daily? Another question you may ask yourself is, how would anyone believe in your character or competence? What are you sharing, and how are you sharing it so that comes through? And Angelou finally says this one last thing. I love this quote again. Have enough courage to trust, love one more time, and always one more time. See, communication is a challenge. Communication is not something to be taken lightly. It requires boldness. It requires a certain swagger, a certain savoir-faire, a certain ability and willingness to be vulnerable, to share what's important to share so that people know you, they like you, and they trust you. When you don't do this well, when you don't look for reasons to know, like, and trust other people when they're communicating, then you're leaving it completely up to them as the listener to give you all the information they need to give you in order for you to be satisfied with them. Well, that brings up another thought. How do you make sure that when people are communicating to you, they're transferring to you information that's meaningful, logical, that makes sense to you, that feels good to you, that's relevant to you? Well, then you have to have done your homework ahead of time and know what's relevant to you, and then ask the questions using discourse. Again, another type of communication strategy in order to tease out the information that you need. Because yes, it happens all the time. People come to meetings and they share what they think they want to share, what's relevant, what's important. But that's not what we want to hear. So we got to ask, what do you think about that? What do you love about this? What makes this meaningful to you? Why is this relevant or significant to you? Why are you presenting us this information right now, today. That's engagement, guys. If you find yourself communicating with somebody and you have more questions than answers, but no way to get those questions answered because you don't even have a follow-up meeting or time to talk to them again, then you've effectively miscommunicated and you've left it hanging, right? You've got information that you need to have in order to build trust, in order to build relationship, in order to feel like you can share something or support them, but you don't have all the answers and they don't even have the questions, so they don't know. You're left with an incomplete communication, right? And it's impossible to build confidence. In fact, there are 3 things you have to have in order to build a confident communication strategy. And they have to work. These are reciprocal ideas and concepts. And then I'm going to get down to, what time is it? Yeah. And then I'm going to get down to the assessment that I think you all need to think about asking for yourself. Some of the questions and assessments I've already talked about. But anything you can do to bring these 3 ideas to your communication will increase confidence in your communication. Number 1, is it authentic? Does it come from a place of substance, of reality that's based and rooted on who you are? Are you really, truly, authentically communicating? Are you finding the authenticity that other people are sharing? Are they speaking with forked tongue? You got to ask those questions, right? Are they really giving you the authentic truth? Number 2, is it logical? Does it make sense? When you line it up from a linear perspective, when does this thing beget that thing that begets this thing that begets that thing that makes sense? It all lines up. Is it logical? Can you come up with a foundation and a conclusion based on the logic train? If not, then it doesn't make sense. It's hard to connect to it. It's hard to share it. It's hard to understand it, right? And last thing, probably the most important thing, is can you feel it? All 3 of those things need to be present in every communication, both receiving and sharing, and then finally, for you, whether you're delivering it, whether you're receiving it, or you're sharing it, in between, all those things need to happen, right? Empathy is number 3. They got to be there. If you can't feel it, if you don't have an understanding of the emotional, social buttons or the intelligence buttons that are being pushed in order to create it, then I think you're missing the boat. I think you're missing the greatest aspect of confidence building and what communication can share with you. So I like to call it the 3 tests, the 3-part confidence test in the communication strategy. Is it logic? Is it authentic? Is it empathy? Is there empathy that runs through it? And you can come up with all kinds of concepts or ideas that you want to share if you really want to do this with each other. But I want you to think through what it means. The last thing I want to share with you is what I call the networking communication skills assessment. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to copy this into the chat, all 10 questions. You can do what you want to do with these questions. But I'm going to say that you need to think about them for yourself. You need to think about them and what they mean to you and how you do them. Right? And they're going to show up. I'm going to ask you the questions. I want you to take a look at these questions. And I'm going to take a quick break, but then I'm going to come back and we're going to discuss each and every one of the questions. And so while I'm taking a coffee refill break, it is about 3:54, which means, we've been going at this now for a good 50 minutes or so. So it's always useful to take a quick break, and I'm going to come back and we're going to go through the assessment together. So for those of you all who, can you see the assessment? Oh my God, it's on YouTube, but it's not on Facebook because it's too big to go on Facebook. Okay, I'll figure out a way to transfer the questions. For those of you all who are looking at this on YouTube, you can see it. But those who are looking at Facebook, you probably can't. And so I'll figure out how to fix that in just a second. All right, guys, I'm back in the studio. Sorry. Oh, good. Scott says it is on Facebook. It just doesn't show up on my screen. That's awesome. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. So these are the questions that if you ask yourself these questions and give yourself a rating, you go through each one of them and give yourself a rating from a scale of 1 to 5. 1, you're horrible at this, but 10 being you're great at this. You can begin to assess your communication skills and your communication strategy. You can begin to look at what's working and what's not working. I want to run you through them really quickly, but you can run through them on your own. And, on a side piece of paper, if you want to, just give yourself a number on these things, all right? And they're all stated as true ideas and concepts, right? Absolutely true. And what you're rating yourself is on how true are they for you, right? So for instance, and I'll rate myself as we go along. Number 1, I work hard to convey only the most meaningful ideas and concepts to my stakeholders and referral sources. I work hard to convey only the most meaningful ideas and concepts to my stakeholders and referral sources. I'm going to give myself a 9 right there because 1, I know who my stakeholders and referral sources are. And when I talk to them, they always reflect back to me. They understand exactly what I want, exactly what I need, why I want it, how I want it, and how it's going to work best for them and for me. They understand it. So I'm going to give myself a 9 on that one. What do you give yourself? Number 2, I am actively engaged and listening to people in my inner circle carefully with the intent of understanding how I might be of value to them. I'm actively engaged in listening to people in my inner circle carefully with the intent of understanding how I might be of value to them. I listen to people. I listen to them, especially those in my inner circle, in such a way as I'm trying to determine how I might be of value to them. Give yourself a rating, 1 to 10. I'm gonna give myself a 9 in that category as well. Because it's very rare when someone else is sharing something of some information with me that I'm not thinking about how I can help them be better. It's very rare that I have my mind occupied on other things and I'm distracted by other things because I'm generally dialed in to what people are saying. So much so that people love talking to me. They love talking to me because they know I'm a great listener. And I'm a great supporter too. And I'm a master at encouraging others. So, think about that. Where are you? Give yourself a rating. Number 3, I don't make assumptions when I communicate with others, even when I feel like I know them. This one's a tough one. It's a tough one for me. Because when I'm dialed in and I feel like I know you and I understand you, I make all kinds of assumptions. And it's hard for me to suspend those assumptions and be open to the moment. But that is what is required to maximize the effectiveness of the communication in that moment. If I look at anybody who's communicated to me before, even people I have relationships with before, and I see them as a finished product, meaning they can't grow, there's nothing new that they might share, there's no new information coming from them, there's no new style, there's no new magic, there's no nothing, I got it already, then why am I talking to them? Because they have nothing to transfer. I'm just stereotyping them. I'm putting them in a box that they're already done. I already know everything I need to know about them. Everything that they can possibly share, I already got that too. And so I have to work on this. This one I would give myself about a 4 on. Because I make lots of assumptions. I value my own thinking a lot more than I probably should. And you probably do too, if you want to be honest with yourself. But I need a lot of work on that because it's very difficult. So I got to start asking myself those same questions when I'm listening to people, not just to make them feel good, but to actually truly know but I'm not somehow sabotaging or damaging the communication in my own mind before we even get started. Number 4, I am certain to make my points and my desires clear first, and then give any relative supporting evidence or important details afterward when communicating to my networks. You know, there's some people who just wander around communication. They wander around. They don't ever make the point, but it seems like they're going somewhere, but they never seem to land. The best communicators work that in exactly the opposite. They go, I'm going to tell you this, and then this is the point that I'm trying to make. And here's how I came to the conclusion that that was the point that I should be making. So they're going to tell you what, and then they're going to tell you why, or how, or both later on. But here's what it is. Here's how and why later on. Right? Those are the best communication strategies for people to see the logic, the evidence of what you're doing and you're thinking, so they can then see that your brain is actually working. You've actually done your homework. You're not just spouting off meaningless gibberish, right? You're talking about something that's relevant, that makes some sense, and they can see the sense of it because they can understand the logic train, right? I give myself an 8 at that. I'm pretty good at that usually. Number 5, I'm excellent at providing clear, concise clarity and direction when I speak, so as to not to create confusion or ambivalence on my teams. Oh, trust me, when I'm working with a group of people and we're working together on something, the project in of itself is so important, and I understand how valuable communication is and how miscommunication can mess up everything for everybody. I'm very, 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 very careful with how I communicate. I'm very, very clear. I try to be concise. I try to be specific. I try to make sure I give meaningful direction when it's time to give direction, so that people don't get lost, and people don't get confused, because I want to make sure that doesn't happen. What rating would you give yourself on that one? Number 6, I seek quality feedback and opinions from my highest ideals from industry leaders and connections. Number 6, I seek quality feedback and opinions on my ideals from industry leaders and connections. Okay. So all of us have a profession, we have an industry, we have something that we belong to, some organization, some concept, some qualifying or certifying body that we call ourselves a part of. How do we know we're communicating effectively with that organization? How do we know that we're bringing quality information and ideas to that group if we don't seek quality feedback? This one's a tough one for a lot of us because, one, we don't like to give people feedback because we don't want to offend, but 2, people don't like to receive feedback because they didn't ask for it. So we can fix the second part of that. If you're the person that's communicating, also communicate while you're communicating how valuable your feedback is from people that you're talking to, and how it's important that they pay attention, and how it's important that they engage with you as best as they possibly can, and how important it is that they give you feedback, and what that means to you and your forward growth and development, and how you honor them for doing so, right? The more you can give permission, the more you can share with people why feedback is important to you, the more they'll give you the information and the ideas and the concepts you need to grow, right? The less you clear that path, people are going to, unless you say, I welcome it, I love it, I need it, it's important to me, people are not going to give you the feedback you need. They're not going to make the assumption that that's going to be welcome for you, because usually it's not. Usually people are not really open to it. So you have to make sure. I would say, give yourself, if you're good at that, that's wonderful. If you're bad at it, then that's something that you need to improve upon. Number 7, I'm constantly learning from the best of the best in my field. Again, if you don't communicate effectively, the best people are not going to want to talk to you. They're not going to want to share what they know with you. They're not going to transfer the valuable information, the valuable connections. They're not going to support you. They're not going to give you the resources. They're not going to do anything and spend any social capital in your direction. It's just not going to happen if you're not purposefully creating the kinds of discourse, the kinds of dialogue, the kinds of communication strategy needed to get to know, like, and trust them, and vice versa. Make sure they know, like, and trust you. Number 8, I am deliberate and consistent on how I make meaningful real-time connections with my target market. If I ask you who your target market is and you're in business and you can't tell me because you think your product is for anybody, everybody, I automatically know right then and there you don't have a strategy. You don't have the kind of competence that's impressive to me. You know, that you could create a product, or that you are selling a product that's good for everybody, that's wonderful. Everybody can't afford it. Everybody's not interested in it. Everybody doesn't want it. And so talking to me about everybody is ridiculous. But I think people do that all the time. And when you communicate, especially you got a product or service or a business that you're trying to communicate about, you got to talk about specifically who wants it, who needs it, who can and will afford it most often. Because if you're not helping people around you to support you, to help you find those people who you should find, people who would appreciate knowing about your program or your product or your service. And they would appreciate it immediately in a way that's going to be useful, beneficial to both of you, right? It's very, very important. Number 9, I communicate so effectively that people in my inner circle know what resources I need to grow and strengthen my talents, and are actively involved with helping me to acquire them. We all need support to grow. We need support to get stronger. We need support and encouragement and resources and the sharing from other people in order to move forward in life. And if you don't know what you need to figure it out. You need to ask somebody. You need to talk to people who actually do know what you need. And then trust that they're not going to lead you astray. It only happens when you trust them. It only happens when they give you the trust right back when you trust them. That's kind of how it works. It's another law of reciprocity, right? Number 10, my networks make excellent use of my greatest talents and depend on me regularly. If you have great networks, they understand you. They understand what they can do with you. They understand how to use you. They understand how to work with you. They understand what to support you with. They understand everything there is to understand that makes it relevant in working with you. If you've communicated effectively, that is what you've transferred, an understanding. If you haven't, then they don't understand. And then they do things that may not make any sense, or they do things that are based on what they would like to have done, or what's working for them, but not necessarily what works for you. This is all important stuff. Now, I could talk about communication literally forever. I could talk about it and on ways that we could, and there's tons of tools that I've created and processes and programs that I'm going to be sharing with you guys, everybody who talks to me in the future. But understand, communication is the most vital aspect of everything we do to, for, and with one another as human beings. This is my total belief. And I know it to be true that if we don't work on this, if we don't do this thoroughly and completely, if we don't really knock this out of the park, then I think what'll happen is it will make so many mistakes, and we'll continue to make those mistakes because when communication doesn't work well, ignorance is thorough and complete. I reposted number 9 and number 10 because some people told me that they couldn't get to them all. All right, all of the questions. All right, so if there's any questions out there, any questions that you all would like to share, any questions that you want to take a deep dive into about anything regarding communication, please go ahead and share those questions. I see my boy David threw an idea out there. I love this. It takes a lot of self-control to truly listen, to avoid interruptions, And David says he has a Post-it note. For those of you all didn't see that, he has a Post-it note to help remind him to not interrupt. I'm going to share with you that it's probably more important to actively listen. And I've showed you some examples of what active listening is, right? Ask yourself the questions as a person is communicating, just in your own brain. What's relevant about this, what they're sharing to me? Who do I know who needs to have this information? How can I make this information work for me? How can I benefit them, the person who's sharing, when they're sharing information? You have those kinds of questions, those prompts going on in your brain all the time. Why is this meaningful? Why is this relevant? Why is it significant? What can I do with it? Right? Then the likelihood that you're going to zone out and not listen or start to think about what it is that you want to say next is probably not going to be there. But it takes a lot to listen like that. It takes a lot to communicate. When you're communicating, you got to answer those questions too, right? Why is this relevant? Why is this meaningful? Why is this significant? And who cares? If you're not talking about that stuff, then again, it's hard for people who you're supposed to be talking to identify themselves. Look, it's me. That's what you know what? When I need a roof and the roofer shows up, I'm literally interested in what the roofer has to say. But when I don't need a roof and the roofer shows up and starts talking about why I need a roof, the roofer's got to get over my belief right now that I don't need a roof. When you need when you need to win people to your side, you need to win them to your advantage. You need to tell them why. Why should they even look out for you? Why should they even listen to you long enough? If you can't answer those questions, really, in a meaningful, powerful way, then I gotta think that what you're communicating is probably not going to be effective, not as effective as it can be. I see my boy Jeff came in. I love you, Jeff. Thanks for showing up, bro. Let me see who else is out there that I haven't spoken to. I see my boy. Oh yeah, Warren. Good to see you, Warren. I'm glad that you're here. Thanks for coming out. And again, like I said to you guys earlier, if there's something that you have that you want others to pay attention to, feel free to post it in the chat. Feel free to talk about it. Post your information, your contact information. People, you never know who might bump into somebody who might know you. Most of the people who follow me are serious-minded people who are good people. I try not to let a whole bunch of ne'er-do-wells in the room with me, but you never know. So just think about that. I love all of your comments and all of your content. Listen, this stuff is going to be posted. It's going to be posted on Facebook. It's going to be posted on YouTube. You can rewatch it. You can share it. I really love it. If you're watching it on YouTube, give me a thumbs up. Give me a what do they call it? Go ahead and subscribe. If you're watching this on Facebook, then go ahead and hit the like button and make sure that you share it as much as you possibly can with your friends. And we will see you guys. If I don't have any other questions or anything that anybody wants to discuss, we will see you guys next time. And I guess we got about a 5-second delay. I discovered that last week. So I'm going to give it 5 seconds to see if any other questions show up. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I love you guys. Good night.